We're going to be joined now by Setareh Sadeqi. She is a PhD in American Studies from University of Tehran. She joins us from Esfahan, which is one of the largest cities in Iran. She's a teacher and also a podcaster. Her podcast and YouTube channel are host. She's the host of Twice Told Tales. That's on YouTube, and it's also a podcast. Setareh, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
And so, Setareh, can you first set the background here? What is your own take on the policy that is being protested against right now across Iran, and what has your involvement been in kind of pushing back against the law that is currently at the center of these protests?
Well, as a woman and who is concerned about women's rights in my country, I have been a part of the online campaign, which was launched well before the tragic death of Mahsa Amini in police custody. And I used hashtags to join other women and men to protest the way the mandatory hijab is enforced, and to protest the quote-unquote morality police, which in Persian we call it the guidance patrol, by the way. But as a woman who's been active in the society, I have always been concerned about how this struggle of women's rights inside Iran is also represented outside, because we don't want anyone to make our struggles within the society, within Iran, more difficult. So when the protests started, people wanted to make a statement to the state and say that the morality police has to be abandoned. But soon the protests were going a totally different direction. And in my city, for example, they were not as huge as the other protests that I have seen over the years.
Oh, that's really interesting. And on that point, as you sort of question or work to on the legitimacy of the representation of what's happening outside of Iran in maybe Western media, what is it, do you think, or are there things that the American media is getting, Western media maybe in general, is getting wrong about what's happening right now? Are there narratives or themes or storylines you see coming out of Western media that are most egregious?
Well, I mean, a lot. It's not the first time that the Western media has tried to control the narrative and portray Iran as very different from the realities on the ground. But this time it has been really unprecedented, and probably the people in America and elsewhere in the world have been hearing about the news in Iran 24/7 as if something really huge has been happening. But when you come inside Iran, I have been talking to tourists just a few days ago when I was on a picnic with my family, and they did not even notice anything in Iran, in Tehran or in Esfahan and in other cities that they had been visiting. And the tourists are even still coming to the country, even though we're seeing a decline in the number of people from outside who want to visit Iran because of obviously what they hear. So this coordinated manipulation campaign cannot be denied. And, as an Iranian, as one of the members of the Iranian nation, I have seen that Western countries, especially the U.S., has launched different propaganda campaigns against my nation. They have tried to demonize the Iranian nation, to portray Iranian women as submissive and needing help from outside, while Iranian women are very powerful. They don't need help from outside. 57% of Iranian university students are women. Above 44% of the university graduates are women. Women are active in different sectors, and they run NGOs. They're entrepreneurs, they're doctors, university teachers, etc. And they know how to control everything. But what we are seeing from the Western media is troll farms, basically, trying to portray what is happening inside Iran as almost a revolution, which is it's really funny for us who are living in Iran, because if we don't open our Twitter or our Instagram or other social media, we don't see anything happening around us. But once we get on social media, we feel that something very important is happening. I walk downtown, I go to work, I visit family and friends, and I don't see anything happening. I hear from friends that there have been protests here and there. Many of them have already died out, and people are still trying to make a statement to the state and try to change the things that they don't agree with. But overall, we do not want a regime change, to be frank. We're happy with a lot of things that are happening here. At the same time, we're protesting and we're demanding more equal rights and more civil rights. And this has nothing to do with anyone from outside. As Malcolm X said in his famous "The Bullet or Ballot" speech, our brothers and sisters, I know they have good intentions, but those from outside Iran better not even speak about it, because they just make our struggle more difficult. We don't need help from outside. We know how to deal with the government and pursue our goals.
How does the unrest that you're seeing and the protests that you're seeing now compare to 2019? And what were the different kind of goals and agendas of those two different protests?
Or even 2009.
Well, yes. I mean, in 2019, the protests started over the fuel prices going high. So it was mainly by the working class, but also a middle class that was also hit by the economic problems that we have. And by the way, it's important to know that, alongside the mismanagement that we might have in Iran, it's also U.S. sanctions, the U.S. unilateral coercive measures against Iran that are hitting ordinary Iranian citizens. And that's why we find everything that comes from the U.S. claiming to be advocating for the rights of Iranian citizens as very, very hypocritical. We have not forgotten that the U.S. backed Saddam Hussein in its war. I was born during the war, by the way. And we have not forgotten that the U.S. backed Saddam Hussein's invasion of Iran, and some European countries armed Saddam with chemical weapons, and we still have people who are suffering from them. We haven't forgotten that the U.S. downed our passenger plane on the Persian Gulf. We haven't forgotten that the Bush administration, for example, armed and trained the MEK terrorist cult in Nevada to assassinate our nuclear scientists. The sanctions are still hurting ordinary citizens. So with having seen all of that, we find anything that comes from the U.S. very hypocritical. I think that makes a difference. If anyone had doubts that the U.S. is pursuing its agenda, now it has become more clear, because in 2019, when the working class was protesting, and the protests were a lot larger than this year, we did not see as much coverage of the events as we're seeing now. And, CNN did this article on how the narrative is being taken over online, and how so many of the accounts that have been using the hashtags regarding Mahsa Amini's death have been actually fake accounts, or accounts that have been created only 10 days after, up to 10 days after Mahsa Amini's death. And it's surprising that the Twitter is not even taking down those fake accounts. And you see celebrities with millions of followers sharing fake videos. And even when they are told that this is a fake video, this is, for example, from a drama scene, they keep that on. And so it's very different in the sense that Iranian people, and I think the world is gradually also understanding that they have been lied to about whatever is happening in Iran. And they have not, and how many voices from inside Iran have people been hearing? I mean, you have, I'm glad that you gave me this platform so that I can, as one voice inside Iran, speak to the people of the world. But there are really not many platforms out there for Iranians to be able to speak and say that, yes, we're not a monolithic society. We have grievances with our governments. Well, we're not looking for regime change, and we're living a normal life.
Speaking of that non-monolithic approach, can you talk a little bit about what's going on in the Baluchi region or the Kurdish region? There were reports that more than 60 people were killed, I think, in the Baluchi region. There's reports of some clashes with protesters in Kurdish regions. What's going on? How did this begin as a protest around the morality police and evolve into these types of clashes? And what are the latest on those? And I imagine you're not there, but I assume that you're getting reports from out there.
Yes, because when I lived in Tehran, I had roommates from across the country, and I have had Kurdish friends, and the Kurdish ethnicity comes second to our Iranian nationality. We don't really feel that someone is from a different ethnicity. It's very different here. Ethnicity is something that comes second to our nationality. And we have family members who marry into other ethnicities, and that's very normal in different cities. I have been talking to them too. The thing is, there are a few terrorist groups and separatist groups that have been exploiting ethnicity to pursue their agendas. And they are usually, as has been proved several times, not only in Iran, but also in Turkey, in Iraq, and Syria. They are funded and backed by the US and the UK and the Israeli regime because they are seeking to destabilize the Middle East, and especially destabilize Iran, because, we have been a very a country with which has been well established. We don't have issues of security or destabilization that much, but they are trying to create chaos inside the country. So when there is unrest, when there are protests and riots, it's a great opportunity for those terrorist groups to pursue their own agenda. When Mahsa Amini died, his father made it clear to the public that this has nothing to do with her Kurdish identity. It is an issue of women's right for all Iranians, regardless of their ethnicity, and they don't want the ethnicity to be highlighted because it doesn't really matter. And that's the same for all Iranians from other ethnicities. In Balochistan, we also had terrorist groups which are funded and backed by Saudi and Salafi ideology, and they have always been very active. Unfortunately, they have killed a lot of police officers, not just this year, in previous years too, because they are at the border with Pakistan, and they seek to create chaos there. So what happened in Balochistan and what happened in Sanandaj, for example, was that we saw activities from random people shooting, and then the police had to get involved. And when something like that happens, unfortunately and sadly, we also see innocent people getting killed. But there are videos of what happens in, for example, Sistan Balochistan, where people dressed as ordinary people come and start shooting at protesters, from among the protesters, and they start shooting at protesters. So, and because of all the lies and fake stories that have been going viral online, it becomes very difficult for people to understand who's exactly causing this chaos in the country, and they want to step back and just not to be involved in the protests anymore. And that's, I think, one reason that the protests have already died out.
It's interesting because I remember back in 2000, I think it was 2009, the Obama era, the idea was that Twitter was fueling revolution and that it was going to topple authoritarian dictators.
Well, and Setareh could talk about this. In 2019, they shut the internet down for at least a week, like a full week. So like there is power.
No, of course there's power, but there's so much power for fake information to go viral too, and that's what that is. So I think that is such a stark contrast with the way Twitter was being pitched back in the aughts. And I wanted to ask, obviously the hostility between the United States and Iran is long and complicated and two-sided. But if we separate the sort of ordinary citizens from the government, there are a lot of regular Americans who want to know, what is the plight of women in Iran? You cut out all of the Western disinformation and narrative. Right. What are activists in Iran like yourself? What can your government? What should your government be doing better for women?
Well, I think we have improved a lot over the years, and that's because women have been taking the lead in demanding reforms with, for example, laws regarding women. And it's been improving. So what we ask the government is just to speed up this process and allow for more and more women to get involved and to support them. Women in Iran have been able to change a lot of laws regarding women and have improved the situation for women. And that's why, as I said, we are seeing more women studying at universities than men even. And in some majors, it's even more than 70% of the students are women. So this is what we have been doing, and we have to educate our nation as well. I mean, it's not everything comes from the government. We have to also educate the grassroots. But what we want the government to do is to resist any foreign intervention and do not allow our struggle for civil rights and for more equal rights to be hijacked by forces outside. This is basically the main thing, and we want the government to focus on us. And I know that when there is so much hostility targeted towards Iran, it becomes very difficult for the government also to, they will have to get busy at the borders, they will get busy at a lot of other things, but still we want them to focus on the issues inside and try to make it easier for women to pursue their goals.
Somewhat off-topic question, but not totally. Iran has a pretty strict abortion ban, and I'm curious, since I live in a country that's headed in that direction, what has been the effect of that? Is there a significant black market for abortions? Is there an abortion rights? Is there kind of an underground abortion rights movement there? Where is Iranian society and law on that question right now?
Well, the abortion in Iran is not totally banned. If abortion is necessary for the mother's health, or if you get permission from doctors, you can do it in the regular hospitals, and that's not very difficult. And that's also one thing that women's rights have been working on. Because the majority of Iranians are Muslim and they want the Islamic laws to be enforced, they have maybe some sort of different ideas about how abortion has to be banned or not banned here. But based on Islamic law and based on the Iranian law, the mother's health and well-being comes first. And that's what plays a pivotal role in whether a woman is allowed to abort or not. Like Christians, I'm sure the Christian community also believes that at least as Christians, they should be able to practice what they believe in, or the Jewish community. And here too, Muslims want to be allowed to practice what they believe in. And I think it's very important to understand it's not about only abortion. It's with a lot of other rules. For example, the head cover or the covering. It's very important to understand that not everyone in the world wants to enforce the liberal Western notion of freedom or bodily autonomy. There are people who believe in their own ideas, and that's about the majority of Iranians here. It's interesting to know that there have been campaigns inside Iran because, it has become very easy for women to just get a permission from their doctors to abort. And there have been campaigns inside Iran asking doctors to make it more difficult because the patients have to be well informed about the consequences and about everything that would happen to them. And they are asking for more education for women so that if they make a decision, it's not only coming from the doctors, it's also something that they really want to do.
Mm. What, just curious, if you could get and maybe you have some polling that you trust, what is the general attitude toward the particular law around required hijab in public? Where do you think the Iranian public would come down on that? And if it were repealed, what's your guess on what the effect of that would be? How many women would voluntarily continue wearing it in public?
That's a good question, because it's another one of those things the Western media latches onto as a sort of straight and narrow question of within the framing of Western freedom.
Exactly, and the way they portray women inside Iran wearing hijab is that they have been asked by men to do it, and women are submissive or anything, but women here are very powerful and they know how to, as I said, achieve their goals. But there are a few statistics, but because that's a topic that has not, it has not been the main concern for Iranian women. Iranian women do not have the mandatory hijab, whether for it to be enforced or not, has not been the first priority for Iranian women. Iranian women want changes with other things that happen to us. For example, more equal rights in job opportunities, in marriage rights, etc. So I understand that the West might have difficulty understanding that a lot of people here do not really have an issue with covering their heads. And they understand the culture here, because I have friends who do not like to wear the headscarf, but they have been practicing it because they know that it's not only the government the government has been enforcing it because a majority wanted it to be enforced. But now this is changing. With the demographics changing and with the society going on, these are changing. And I cannot give you, the statistics that I have heard from different independent bodies inside Iran ranges from 1%, from different percentages. So it's not like very exact. But I could tell you that there is still a majority that would practice hijab even if it was not mandatory. And that's coming from even the Generation Z, as you call it here. I've talked to students at universities. I've talked to high school students, even those who, for example, practice it, wearing it like quite relaxed and different from what the government demands. Even them, they say that if it was voluntary and I could make a choice, I would still wear it, even if it's like just covering half of my hair and not fully. But I would still wear it because the majority of Iranians are still religious. We have strong families here, and family bonds here. Families are still functioning to a large extent, and that's very different from the West. And families cherish and celebrate Islamic values. So, yes, I think there is a larger number now compared to, for example, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, that do not want to practice it anymore. And I think people should be allowed to choose, as it functions in all democracies.
That seems like such a reasonable position. If you want to wear it, wear it. If you don't want to wear it, don't wear it. Why won't is there something symbolic about this particular law that the government is clinging to? Why won't the government move to that more reasonable position, which says, hey, you want to wear it? That's wonderful. If you don't want to wear it, that's also fine.
Well, how does the U.S. government decide on whether to legalize abortion or not? It's basically
we have
based on the votes.
We have 9 unelected kind of religious leaders
appointed by our elected leaders.
We have a Supreme Council of religious leaders that we call the Supreme Court, and they have final say over our laws. I understand that you have a similar system over there.
Okay, yes, but we also have the parliament, and the parliament is the way through the channel through which we can change a law. I mean, demand from the government to start changing the law. So if because you also need to understand that there is a large proportion of the population who is not against the mandatory hijab law. So if you want to satisfy and if you want to convince public opinion, it has to be that people should be allowed. It is a long process. You have to start educating people and working on that, because I'm sure that if Iran stopped enforcing the hijab law, there would also be a large proportion who would take to the streets and say that this is disrespectful to their Islamic values. So the country has to take all these groups of people into account. But apart from that, it's also that hijab is also a symbol of fighting and resisting imperialist power. Not now, but even during the Shah, the Pahlavi era or the Qajar era, when hijab was not mandatory, most people were practicing it. And it was not, at some point even, because during the first Pahlavi Shah, it was banned, it became even more of a symbol of resistance, because people were feeling that there is an attack on their values and they wanted to resist that. So I think I hope that the government will show more flexibility towards changing it. And so that more people, we have a more inclusive, consensus on what to do here. But I think that's also something that the people should decide. The government alone cannot make a decision on it. We have to convince the public opinion.
Yeah, I was being a little bit glib earlier, because there is still a link to. There's some link to public opinion. So, for instance, when our Supreme Court finally legalized marriage equality, it did so not out of thin air, but after a serious kind of cultural movement pushing to allow for same-sex marriage. And so it wasn't as if they just kind of came up with it on their own. And
exactly.
There was a significant movement to ban, to curtail abortion rights as well, that culminated in Roe v. Wade being overturned. So it's not like it's completely disconnected from public opinion. It's just not as easy as public preferences becoming law kind of overnight. Yeah, and so it can be a long process.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your perspective. We really appreciate it.
No problem. My pleasure.
All right, well, that wraps up today's show. We were really packed. We kind of took a tour of the whole world, basically, and American politics as well. Really interesting interview and just an interesting guest. Yeah, and it's nice to hear a different perspective, yes. Whether or not you agree with it or not. Like we need to hear all bunch of different perspectives from both inside and outside. That's the thing, country. Right? And this conversation about the concept of freedom in the West, right? Because Western media is so dominant, especially in sort of big business, mass media, that I think our concept of freedom is the most just definition of it. It is the correct, proper. And Setareh seemed to agree with it, also. And though to a point. The sort of the perspective, though, of what other people see as freedom is, I think, one that the Western media doesn't like to platform and doesn't like to have these uncomfortable conversations because they're difficult and complicated, and they don't sort of fit neatly into the package of that you want to sort of send out to people's living rooms and wherever for early morning television, but they're really important. And at least to have that kind of cross-pollination, have that conversation, it's such a loss. Our media could have conversations like that every day if they wanted to.
And there's also a running theme from yesterday where we had Ambassador Dan Foote talking about the unrest in Haiti. And he was, and we were talking about how if there are protests in Cuba, Western media, in particular U.S. media, is going to spend its focus 24/7 looking at the protests in Cuba. Haiti blows up, nobody cares about Haiti. In Iran in 2019, they're protesting over fuel prices, which are exacerbated by American sanctions. They shut the internet down for an entire week. They killed hundreds of people in those 2019 protests. Barely a peep.
Well, and
barely registered in U.S. media. But then a protest. This protest is getting just relentless coverage. Where and if you take Setareh's word for it, in Esfahan, you walk out in Esfahan, and you can't even tell that anything's going on. It doesn't mean that there isn't a passionate upswell of
exactly
and a surge in opposition to this headscarf law. But we also need to take it in proper context, because you don't want viewers then to be like totally shocked that the regime doesn't fall.
Yeah.
And that a week later, you're like, wait a minute, what happened to those protests that we were talking about all the time?
Well, yeah.
And then you further lose trust in your media sources, because they're telling you that this regime is on the brink of collapse when in fact it isn't.
Well, and the money that the American public works really hard to make is on the line as well, because our tax money is on the line in negotiations over an Iran deal, literally right now. And so it's important to the public to have an accurate sort of rendering of what's happening inside the borders of a country that could be getting plenty of our money, or could be on the brunt of losing our money or our spending, period, in any different way. So it's frustrating. I mean, our major media could be having these conversations every day. They won't.
Right.
And so,
and she's also right that there are a lot. There is foreign influence in those particular regions that she talked about, but it absolutely doesn't justify, security forces cracking down and killing dozens of people.
Yeah.
So all of those different things can be true.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you joining us here on the show. Crystal and Sagar will be back this week. We'll be back on Friday, and it's been a pleasure. And in general, we just appreciate the viewers so much for making it possible for us to have conversations like this one. So we hope everybody has a great Tuesday, and we'll see you soon.
See you then.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.